Okay, so that was embarrassing. It looks like after about 10, 15 minutes of talking, I discovered that the audio wasn't working, and it seems to be working now, but I had to reboot my computer. So hopefully you made it over to the new Hangout. If not, no worries, because it'll be recorded. Thanks, Asia, by the way. I would have done the entire Hangout had I not seen your Q&A. So, yes, welcome. Thanks for making it over. So let me go through everything that I just said again. The purpose of this first Hangout is to go through the content for this week, and also to talk about this class, the curriculum, and the coach and client relationship that we're going to have. The latter is really the most important thing here. When it comes to most types of coaching, you have this model where a coach or a trainer tells you what to do. They'll give you a diet, they'll give you a training program, they'll tell you not to drink, they'll tell you that there's no sort of variation, or they might help you with variation. But if you don't follow what they say, then they'll discipline you, or they might not discipline you. Either way, you don't really learn anything from when you make a mistake. In fact, if the coach does discipline you, you probably already feel bad about that mistake. So for example, binge eaters, the worst thing that you can do if somebody is on a diet and binge eats is to yell at them for binge eating, because that's probably something that will exacerbate the tendency even more. They already feel bad about themselves, right? And so the way that my coaching works is, instead of coaching being like wrestling, where I give you something and wrestle with you to do it, it's more like dancing. And I stole that metaphor from motivational interviewing, if you guys have ever heard of it. It's a field where you work through issues like this, or motivation, habit, and you get somebody kind of figuring out what went wrong. So on my end as a coach, I will never, ever, ever judge you for making mistakes. In fact, if you learn from that mistake, or I like to call them missteps instead, then it's a worthwhile lesson, right? It's more like a lesson than anything else. So anything that happens anything bad that you do, any missteps, is going to be looked at objectively and without judgment. So let's say you ended up binge eating and drinking a lot more than you intended to on a given day. What I would do is talk to you about that, right? So ask you where you were, what were the circumstances. So perhaps you went to a happy hour and you only intended on drinking 2 drinks. And then by the second drink, you're like, oh, I'll just have one more. And then that led to a slippery slope mentality. And then after that, you went from drinking like a few drinks to ordering some food, and you knew that you already messed up. So you're like, well, I already messed up. I might as well, say fuck it. If you think about all the things that I broke down, those are known as thought patterns, right? And some of you might have heard these like familiar thoughts in your head. If you look at all the times people make mistakes, and you look at the commonalities, you can really find some patterns to them. And that's what I'll work with you on doing. And you can't work through those unless you do it without judgment, and do it mindfully, right, objectively. And you have to work with me as your coach and communicate. So the only time I will actually be upset is if you don't communicate to me, right? If you're scared to report back because you think I'll yell at you, and so you don't tell me that you were off the last 2 or 3, say 2 or 3 weeks, and you just don't report and don't tell me where you're at. So as long as you communicate, even if you're doing horribly, that's preferable to not communicating at all. So that's my promise as a coach. What I need from you guys, for this relationship to work, I need you guys to take what I have to say with an open mind, right? After all, if you are going to MVF for help, then what you've been doing, probably hasn't been working, or you want a little bit more. So the worst thing that you can do is come into this class with certain preconceived notions. And that's because so much of fitness is super counterintuitive, right? For a lot of binge eaters I see, for example, they actually need to eat more consistently. And the reason they get into this binge eating mentality is because they start starving themselves, and then that leads to an episode, and then they start that episode leads to several days of not dieting, and then they feel guilty, so they do lots of cardio or lots of not eating, and so I'll often have binge eaters eat more consistently and eat a lot every single day to start out. Now, funny enough, even if some people are binge eaters and come to me to help them stop that, the result I get, or the response I get, is pushback, right? And that's a little bit ironic, right? That is ironic because if you're coming to me as an experienced coach, then pushing back and already kind of thinking that you know the solution to how something is going to be done will only impede you, right? So I know a lot of things that you're going to hear throughout MVF are going to be very counterintuitive. And don't worry, I'll give you the evidence basis behind things. Sometimes they're physiologically based. Sometimes they're environmentally based. Sometimes they're both, like intermittent fasting. Tends to be good for suppressing hunger physiologically, but also if you're a busy human being, because you're in this group, you're probably super on the go, then it also works for your environment. But I'll give you the reasoning for certain things, and we'll work through which variations of certain protocols are best for you. So again, it's not that I'm forcing you guys to do anything, but I do want you to communicate and treat everything with an open mind. And if you guys can do that, and I work with you guys to identify things objectively, then what you're going to see out of this group is probably results you haven't seen before, by the way of really, really high ROI, or even, I know there's some like CrossFit paleo people in this group, and this is actually a perfect example. I'll tell you to do things that are probably completely the opposite of what you were doing in CrossFit paleo. So an example is eating more carbohydrates. They can be paleo carbs, you can eat tubers, but also taking your volume down. And what you'll actually see is an improvement in aesthetics, because physiologically speaking, you're probably glycogen depleted from not eating carbohydrates, doing lots of intense workouts. That led to maybe strength increases or functional improvements, but not necessarily muscle growth. And so there was probably a discrepancy or an incongruency between improving in certain movements and let's say physique improvements. So as long as you're willing to take a leap of faith and to work with me, this is going to work out. Anyway, the readings for this week have to do mostly with fitness psychology and the physiology of weight loss, fat loss. We didn't talk too much about building muscle, but that'll come in a bit. Let's start with the psychology, right? One of the biggest misconceptions around fitness is that you can just eat less and move more, or rely on willpower, rely on motivation and self-control in order to be successful, right? And one of the most disappointing things I see is when people do the same thing over and over again and fail. They beat themselves up because they think that they didn't have enough self-control, as opposed to being introspective and mindful and wondering, what actually happened. When you don't rely on self-control and motivation, and there are times to rely on those things, but instead if you build a positive feedback loop, which is the concept of minimum viable fitness, we're going to have you do super, super effective things at the minimum, and then slowly add over time if you want to. But if you do that instead, what's going to happen is, for those of you who've never stuck to a program consistently, you're going to put in so little work for so much outcome that you will want to add more. You might want to add more, but at the very least, you'll want to keep going, right? The amount of effort and the amount of cost that you put in isn't outweighed by, a measly outcome. And so that's the bread and butter of MVF, right? If you can think of it, it's like a MVP, You get enough traction, and then you build from there. So the diet and the training programs I have most of you on. The diet is going to be intermittent fasting plus some sort of high ROI calorie or macro counting, depending what you've done before and depending on kind of your persona that I perceived would work best for which. And the training program is going to be something super minimalistic. So if you're used to a lot of volume, or if you're used to more intense workouts, and you do chest day, for example, you're going to be like, what is this shit? Like, is my program half missing? That's okay. Stick with it. It's intentionally going to be less than you think, and I want everyone to leave the gym being like, oh, it seems like I could have done a lot more. Because what that does is it breaks the hardwiring around thinking that a good, physical outcome is dependent on things like sweat, feeling like crap at the end of the gym, and other things that don't really tie together as good heuristics. Yeah, so that's really the psychological crux in the group. It's a more cerebral group, I think, than other workout plans. So you're really going to have to be mindful and improve on those 5 skills that we talked about, especially the knowledge component. That is something that's important, but the mindful component and the habit component are also really, really important. And then all the stuff around the physiology that you read. Stuff around calories, information on how to track calories. That's going to be the hardest thing, is logging your food if you're not used to it before. Even if you are used to it, learning how to adapt to different circumstances. It's another skill that you'll have to learn. So the first time somebody throws a wrench in your diet plan, you might have no clue what to do. So that's when you ask me, and I'll be happy to help as much as I can. The next time that happens, you'll know certain strategies and you'll know how to look at things. You'll also know when to stop yourself. If you feel like a thought pattern is the function of some sort of cognitive bias, right? Like you're like, oh wait, I thought this before. I thought I was hungry. I ate and I felt worse. You'll know that that's going on again. So the group is mainly cerebral in nature, and for everyone that is in here, I think that you are of that makeup where you're going to be successful as long as we keep in touch with me, keep communicating, stay mindful, and let me help you as much as possible. Okay, I think that is everything. I don't know if Q&A was enabled in this new group. Yes, that should be everything. I will answer questions about your programs. It's still onboarding week, so don't worry too much if you don't get started by tomorrow. Please let me know if you're missing a program or anything is wrong, and I will take care of that. We just built a new system where you can check your programs and enter your inputs. So yeah, if there's anything that's buggy, let me know. As a coach, I also do my own programming, which kind of takes a lot of time to do both. But everything should be working as far as I know. And please just keep asking questions. I'll jump back on into the group and answer everything. And yeah, happy onboarding week, and I'm really excited to work with you guys.